plight of Nigerians abroad. I know you have heard a lot of comments from Senate about this matter, including almost coming from all quarters also. Well, that's what we'll focus on this morning. But first and foremost, we'll get to this report. Remember, the Jibadi Masih did a piece on jail in China. And then the Senate also spoke about the plight of Nigerians, wherever they are abroad. We'll take you through these two, and then we'll be back.
My children are asking of their daddy. Two of them, I have two that don't know their daddy. Every time they be asking me about their daddy.
One of those Nigerians locked up in a Chinese jail is her husband, Ozemena Jonathan DK. He's been there now for over 5 years. Not knowing when her husband would return, Mrs. DK is now left with a difficult challenge of fending for 3 children, all on her own. Another woman with virtually the same story, Charity Okoro, a mother of 4.
Whenever he called us, he's demanding about money. I said, what about the money that you took? You left, you took to China. He said they seized the money.
Meet China. Mama Diana Farimade.
Later, I walk padà lọ. Ó ra àwọn tiles òkú wa. Ó wá tún padà lọ. Tó padà lọ náà la gbọ́ pé ó sá pé wọ́n gbé lọ́hùn.
Her son James Gabriel Adu traveled to China in February 2009, ostensibly on a business trip. But for over 3 years now, Mama Farimade has not seen James. It is believed that there are over 1,000 Nigerians scattered in jails across China. The statistics obtained from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as at the end of March this year put the figure at 360 convictions spread across 21 prisons in China. The number of awaiting trial inmates is put at 123. 80 out of that figure are for drugs-related offences, while 21 are fraud cases.
I've been privileged to speak with about 3, 4, 5, 6 of them on phone, calling from the prison, and I keep on asking them, what did you do? The question is, I did not do anything. I did not do anything.
When the Nigerian ambassador to China knew I was around, Ambassador Wali, he asked for a meeting. And when we met, he expressed frustrations with regard to the increasing number of Nigerians that are being convicted for drug-related offenses in China.
When I learned about this, I immediately got in touch with the Nigerian Foreign Affairs Minister, requesting that he gets in touch with the ambassador in China to give us details of Nigerians in prisons, and they did this and they sent the name to us, and I was really shocked to see the sheer number of these young Nigerians.
We gathered from our source at the Foreign Affairs Ministry that the Nigerian embassy in China has put forward a proposal on behalf of the Nigerian government to the Chinese government, seeking the exchange of prisoners between both countries. But so far, the proposed bilateral agreement has not been signed. Almost on a weekly basis, the nation's anti-drugs agency NDLEA makes audacious arrests and charge drug smugglers and barons to court. But with close to 90% of Nigerians in Chinese jails convicted for drug offenses and some for smuggling drugs into that country, questions are being asked as to whether NDLEA is not losing the war on drugs.
The NDLEA today is winning the war against illicit drugs, trafficking and abuse. But the truth is, it is an enormous challenge.
But it's not just to lay the blame on one sector, because the criminal justice is a chain that starts with the police or the law enforcement agency, to the prosecution, to the courts, to the prison, and to the appeal system. So there's no excuse from one section should not blame the other. It is a holistic thing.
But whether this would really guarantee deterrent, especially among young people who are extremely desperate for a life of comfort, is difficult to tell. DG Badimasi, Channels Television News.
There have been public outcry about this news, very shocking, and I have already called the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he assured me that he will get in touch with our mission in Jakarta, although he was of the opinion that most of the issues relate to drugs and drug-related offenses. So, Mr. President, I wish to suggest that we invite the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs to come and address this distinguished Senate and tell us what exactly is happening and what can be done, if possible, to review or redress some of these cases.
No, people who go and break laws in other countries don't expect us to protect them. We will not allow any Nigerian to be maltreated outside this country, outside the shores of Nigeria. We can even go to war for it, even for one Nigeria, if he's unfairly treated. But Nigerians who go out and they carry drugs, they should know the risk they are taking. We will not defend them also. I think it's a clear dividing line between an honest, genuine Nigerian who is out doing a proper business in accordance with the laws and the regulations of a country, and those who go there to smear the names of Nigeria. That one we just won't take. So leave them there. Let them face what they've gone for.
Well, there you have responses to both parties. Well, Mr. Richard Nwankwo joins us now. He's also the president and founder of Crusade for Justice, which is a human rights advocacy group. He's also a human rights lawyer. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, having heard the responses from, yes, the Senate and what the Senator also raised about what he thinks should be done about these matters, from what you've seen so far, are we approaching these things, these challenges of Nigerians abroad, the way we ought to, or that you assume there's room for improvement?
Well, I think first of all I must make one basic fact clear, that when you have foreign missions and embassies overseas, that these establishments are clearly put in place for the benefit of the interest of Nigeria as a nation and that of Nigerians. And it is also imperative to stay here that the mere fact that somebody has been involved in crime does not make that person, that individual, a lesser Nigerian. So these things must be put in proper perspective, and it's on the strength of this platform that I disagree entirely with the position of the Senate President.
What duty does the country owe? I mean, we all know the peculiar situation that we found ourselves as Nigerians, in the sense that even Nigerians who are going out of the country on honest business now, because of the notoriety that has been associated with our names, some of us are even ashamed of our green passports. You know, don't you think that drastic times require drastic measures, and that what the Senate President has said would help drive home the message that it's high time the Nigerians took the responsibility for themselves, and they know that the responsibility for their name, the good name of the country, lies on their shoulders and their behavior and conduct outside of this country?
Well, that is correct to some extent, but you see, the point that must be made clear is that these people are still Nigerians, that they have committed offenses and they are being charged or prosecuted and convicted, are just indices of issues that have been going on for a pretty long time. And you must also appreciate the fact that Nigeria is not an isolated enclave in terms of crime commission overseas. That even if you go to China, you also see so many Americans, so many Britons and people from other countries that have been involved in crime. But why we should be worried that there are peripheral cases, there are borderline cases. If you have the privilege of interviewing some of these people, you find out that in an environment where the judicial system is very robust and ebullient and vibrant, that there is no way they would have secured conviction. But then you have to take the interests of these peripheral offenders into consideration. A young man who has been involved in crime, who was arrested, the authorities might decide to freeze the telephone handset, for instance, and pick all those who are remotely connected with his business. Of course, you know, some of these business people, they have some other legitimate businesses they do outside this, whatever they do that the nation says they shouldn't do. So what happens when some of these peripheral people are bundled, and then because of the cloudy nature of the criminal justice system there, they are all convicted and sentenced to jail? Are you saying that the government should follow this act? So there are instances where people have been convicted, some Americans and Britons and people from the Western world. You see the government intervene robustly and work out a program by which some of these people are brought back to serve their sentences in their respective countries. So, because the American will insist that if you don't have the facilities that is equivalent to what they have in their home, in their country, that you cannot keep their citizens there.
It brings us to the Rome Statute, which is the ICC convention, which the United States specifically is not a signatory to, whereby you really can't try any American for any kind of war crime or crimes against humanity in your own soil. That individual must be brought back to America. Is that the same picture you're trying to paint here, that Nigeria can as well ask such individuals who are Nigerians, irrespective of what crime that is he or she being tried or charged or to be brought back home?
Well, of course, you know, there has been several protocols after the Rome Statute, and there has been a lot of modifications. And of course, the point I'm making is that I'm not just talking about trial. The fact is that when such people are being tried, that it is only imperative that Nigeria as a nation, especially in communities and countries where we have outputs like embassies or commissions, that these representatives of these our embassies and commissions should be there to witness some of these trials. Because the presence of Nigeria in some of these things, you will be surprised, will make a whole lot of change. And another aspect of it is the fact that there are so many Nigerians that are stranded all over the world. I remember a couple of years back when I went to Antwerp for a program, I was surprised the number of Nigerians, people I could recognize their faces in Lagos. That the problem they had is that they were saying that they really want to get back home.
What happens? What was it? Was the embassy and high missions or commissions, Nigerian houses in such places doing about such?
The problem we have is that some of these embassy officials are extremely hostile. And that is why I'm not particularly surprised with what the Senate President said. There's some measure of hostility. If you go to the Nigerian embassy in Brussels and some other outputs, you find out that the way they treat Nigerians, you will be wondering whether you have any reason to associate with them.
But what has he said?
And that is why when people are outside the country, they find it difficult relating to the embassies and other outputs.
Sorry to cut you there, but what has he said? He said that we're going to protect the lives of any Nigerian that is maltreated unjustly. And we're even prepared to go to war. I mean, Nigerians that are stranded, if you're stranded legitimately outside this country, you would think that the words of the Senate President should cover you. They should offer some protection for you.
You must also take into consideration that the position of the Senate President, he is talking about what the nation should do. These are things that should have been on the ground from day one. All these issues that are raising now are things that should have been running from some years back. It's not now. They're not creating the embassies for the first time this period. These are embassies, and that is the core duty, that is the core essence of the establishment of diplomatic outputs. If you have some of these establishments and you are not using it, and they are not using it to protect the interests of Nigerians, then what is the essence of setting up such outputs?
It's very important what you just raised here, because during the course of that particular research, which culminated in bringing that report, Deji Badmosi actually spoke to some of them, and they said when they go to courts, they don't have interpreters, and the interpreters they bring, there's no Nigerian there to actually verify what the interpreter is saying on your behalf, making it very impossible if he or she is actually representing you in the law court. So can the embassies of Nigeria in such places also provide interpreters for these Nigerians in courts?
You see, when you talk about human rights, there is no way you can talk about human rights without fair trial. There is no way you can talk about fair trial without the person facing trial appreciating and understanding in every minute detail of the terms of the transaction. There must be if China as a nation do not have the resources, or they don't have the individuals to, then there is no basis trying some of these people. Because I listened to the report the first time it was aired, found out that some of them didn't understand the language of the court, that in most cases they were not even asked any question. I mean, what kind of trial is that? So I believe even if the statements credited to some of these people do not reflect what is on the ground, it is enough to put Nigeria as a country on inquiry. It is enough to stimulate our interest, to send a high-power delegation. But one key thing I must point out is the fact that China is also an isolated case. There are so many other countries. These things are coming up because of the level of business transaction going on between the two nations. There are so many other smaller countries where worse things are taking place. And of course, you know that the vibrance you get in the Western world in terms of judicial or criminal justice delivery system is completely non-existent in some of these Asian countries. It's not only China. But we have India, we have Indonesia, Malaysia, and some of these other countries.
Wherein lies...
I remember a particular incident that happened some years back, which we handled, involving some Nigerians that rioted in one of the prisons in India. The riot was basically on issue. It had to do with feeding. If you have been close to the Indian community, you'll appreciate the fact that the average Indian, they don't eat much. That what an average Nigerian takes is it could go for 3 or 4 Indians. And that is it is on that standard that they've been using to feed Nigerians. At the stage, the Nigerians in those prisons with some other Africans rioted, and many of them were killed. So how do you relate that to what is happening now? The point is that these things are just, it is not an issue that the government should be hearing for the first time. The government should be proactive.
Sorry, just for information purpose, I mean, one wonders, when you interact with some of them, wherein lies, did you see any responsibility on their part to also make sure that the laws of the country are not deliberately flouted where they go to?
Well, of course, you understand how it is. There is no community without Judeans. Even if you go to the best part of America, you still see court criminals there. There is no, what our attitude should be dealing with some of these things internally. You will find out that some of these things happening outside the country as a result of the ineffective network we have here, our inability to checkmate some of these excesses. Of course, we have more serious violations in Nigeria. When you're talking about China, there are worse things going on here in Nigeria.
You know, you talked exactly. You talked about the issues of prisons and how most times the fact that the Americans and the Britons, when they are negotiating on behalf of their prisoners who complain that the standard of prison there is not up to what they have in Britain, and even now we're talking about prisoners transfer between Britain and Nigeria, and we understand that some prisoners in Britain do not want to be transferred. Nigerian prisoners in Britain do not want to be transferred back to Nigeria. Now, how do we deal with human rights in that particular instance? How can a country say, okay, for instance, you have been jailed in China, we want our citizens to come home, but the citizens say, no, we don't want to come home. What happens?
Well, of course, they reserve the right to serve their sentences where the offense took place. And if they believe that, we all know that what they have over there is far better than what we have in our prisons here, there is no basis for comparison in terms of feeding, Medicare, and the rest of them. So it's only natural that they will want to serve there. And one thing I must point out, I've had the privilege of visiting some of the prisons in UK. You find out that even the reports we're having here, what is happening in London is grossly underreported. Because the number of Nigerians in prison, some of these UK prisons, the numbers are quite intimidating. And the problem we have is that because of the calm nature of the environment, many people feel that it's better for them to stay over there, serve their sentences, and come back to Nigeria anytime. Because, like you have just said, there is no basis for comparison. And I think, of course, that Nigeria should exercise more, put in more energy in bringing those that are serving in Malaysia, in China, and some of these Asian countries before talking about repatriating those in UK. I think they should do the China incident. I think it deserves more prompt action and some organized, proactive intervention than what is happening in the Western world. So they should deal with these issues that are more critical and more pressing now. And then if need be, they can extend their campaigns to the Western world. But I think in doing that, we should also look inwards and see our own crime prevention mechanism, how effective it has been. Because most of these successes you hear about, they're on the pages of newspapers. What is on the ground does not reflect. It's just like the issue of PHCN. What is on the ground has no relationship with what you say in the newspaper. So I think we should be more proactive, more dynamic and ebullient in dealing with some of these things, and show some level of aggression in arresting some of these, because most of these problems are problems that we are cooked here, problems that we are packaged here before they go to some other jurisdictions. I think we should be more effective.
What do you think about those who suggest that for them it's about emotional blackmail? Some of them think that Nigerians don't owe them anything as much as just ensure that they get fair trial. Because if you go out there and commit some heinous crimes, the best we can do for you is to ensure that you get fair trial.
Well, that's an aspect to that, but of course there are various opinions when it comes to issue of how some of these things should be handled. But I think the key thing is the fact that our embassies and foreign missions and outposts overseas should reflect the sensibilities of our own people and not that of any other person. The opinion of the government must be synchronized with that of the average Nigerian. That first and foremost, you have to protect the interests of the Nigerian. The mere fact that the person has committed a crime does not take away the Nigerian-ness.
But don't you see the intention on the part of Nigeria? Because if he says that we can go to war for every one person there, so that's a start, isn't it? Something we can build on.
Well, on that platform, I share the opinion expressed by the Senate President. But beyond that, like I have said, the attitude must be holistic. There are a lot of, in fact, most of these prisoners you see overseas are marginal offenders. Are offenses that if you subject them to pure forensic defense advocacy, you find out that most of them will go off the hook. So in places like China, when the trial is conducted in their traditional languages, how would you react to that? I think it's also an issue that the International Bar Association should also take up, not just the Nigerian government. That fair trial must be fair trial. There is no esoteric interpretation to fair trial. Fair trial remains fair trial. That the key elements and indices must be in place. And that is one of the key elements is the fact that the trial must be conducted in the language which the accused person properly understands.